For success, attitude is equally as important as ability. Walter Scott. One of the greatest writers of the early 19th century, Walter Scott revolutionized romantic writing. Over the course of his life, he wrote everything from novels to poems, and he even had some personal plays. So, where was he from? Walter Scott was born in Edinburgh, Scotland on August 15th of 1771. However, his childhood was not as easy as most. From an early age, Walter Scott battled polio and luckily overcame it. Walter Scott was an avid reader and loved hearing stories. Yet, at school, later on in his life, he studied law and eventually became a lawyer in the city of Edinburgh. Yet, his passion of writing remained, and soon most of his time went to writing poetry and novels. After years of hard work and arduous labor, his voice was finally being heard, and his romantic ideas and questions surrounding everything from nature to regular society and the themes of a hero and the individual were being heard around the world by an international audience. However, by the 1830s, Scott's health declined, and unfortunately, in September of 1832, Walter Scott died back at his home in Scotland, comfortably in his own house that he had designed. Today, I believe Scott can be seen as one of the greatest romantic movement writers of his time. Walter Scott's voice was heard around the world through his writing, where his romantic ideals and thoughts will never die. As Walter Scott said, "Look back and smile at the perils of the past." But what was Romanticism? Some major themes of Romanticism involved nature, the actions of a hero and individual, and an interest in the historic past. Feelings and emotions are important, and the heroes often played strong roles in the works of Scott at the time. Two of Walter Scott's most well-known stories, even today, are Rob Roy and Ivanhoe. Both stories are historical novels set in different time period. Rob Roy was the first of the two to be read by the world. It was published in 1817 and is known as the predecessor to Ivanhoe. Rob Roy is a story set in both England and Scotland and revolves around the adventures of the main character, Frank Osbaldistone. This story contains the themes of love, money, family, and mystery. As the main character is about to embark on travel to a relative's home, he declares, "In the meanwhile, I was lord of my person, and experienced that feeling of independence which the youthful bosom receives with a thrilling mixture of pleasure and apprehension," displaying the themes of nature and the individual. Following Rob Roy was Ivanhoe. Ivanhoe was written in 1819, but was not published until 1820. I would say that Ivanhoe was Scott's best example of representing his ideals of Romanticism, a movement revolving around literature, art, and an emphasis on nature. Throughout the novel, Scott is very vivid in his description of nature, stating, in Chapter 1 of Ivanhoe, "Hundreds of broad-headed, short-stemmed, wide-branched oaks, which had witnessed the stately march of the Roman soldiery, flung their gnarled arms over a thick carpet of the most delicious green swans," representing a vivid description of nature. The main character of Ivanhoe is Wilfred of Ivanhoe, a Saxon involved in the story of conflict between Saxon and Norman knights in medieval Europe during the 12th century. Other notable characters to appear in the novel include Robin Hood and the Norman king Richard I. Interestingly enough, Robin Hood can be viewed as a hero in this story, someone who holds up an ideal romantic figure and the power of the individual and hero. To conclude, Walter Scott was a romantic writer who took influence from the outside world around him. Romanticism stressed new ideals of society and nature, and Walter Scott included these themes in both novels and poetry. His stories stressed the ideals of the heroic individual and the actions of the individual and his own emotions. Many characters fit the ideal of a hero in Scott's eyes and the power of the individual, including, as stated earlier, Robin Hood and Frank Osbaldiston and Rob Roy, in their quest to fight the higher power. Other themes featured in Scott's writing include nationalism as well, as we have studied already. And a final fact, Walter Scott was Scottish, and his writing was about Scottish times. As a child, he heard stories of old Scottish tales, and this most likely had effect on his future writing. To conclude, once more, Walter Scott was one of the greatest romantic writers.